Good evening, boys and ghouls. Welcome back to the channel. I am your humble host D, and tonight we'll be continuing our journey through horror movie history. Now, the 30s. This decade is considered a shining era for several branches of culture, especially American culture. Superhero comics had their golden age, seeing the birth of characters like Superman and Batman. In movies, we got some of the power classics like Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, and Disney's Snow White. And horror movies are no exception, as you will see. Before we hit the list, please remember that it's all my opinion. But then again, I'm the one making the list, so I'm automatically correct. That's how it works, right? Oh well, here we go. White Zombie could arguably be the first zombie movie. But unlike the reanimated corpses and Walking Dead of modern fiction, this one concerns Haitian zombies, being mentally enslaved rather than undead. The star of the movie is Bela Lugosi, who has the sort of eyes that just seem to kinda follow you around the room. He was one of the big names in horror in the 30s, but apparently agreed to this role for basically loose change, something that he allegedly regretted when the movie became more successful than he expected. Some might say that White Zombie is a bit on the boring side, and it does keep a slow pace, but it has great atmosphere and an almost hypnotic feel to it. Say what you will, to me it shambles right onto the list. Werewolf of London. The first werewolf movie from Universal Studios is often regrettably overshadowed by later entries on the topic. The story of a scientist looking to cure his lycanthropy, or lycanthrophobia as they call it for some reason, might not sound too original today, but as I said, it was among the first of its kind. It's a modest movie, but it's well made and it deserves a lot more love than it gets. Werewolf of London was a pioneer at the time, and today it's like a well-cured ham just howling for a bite. The Black Cat is loosely based on the Edgar Allan Poe story of the same name and is one of several movies that team up two of the bigger actors of the decade, Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. Both are at peak performance here, good as it gets. The themes of revenge, desire and devil worship are tame by today's standards, but must have been shocking back then. Another movie worth mentioning is The Raven, a similar movie with the same two actors that is often compared to this one. That one's great as well, but given the choice, I'm more of a cat person. The Mummy is a result of the Egyptomania that permeated Western culture following the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb a few years earlier. Once again, the star is Boris Karloff, portraying the living dead lead character. Unlike what you could expect, the mummy in this movie is not wrapped up except for in the opening sequence, which might just be one of the best movie scenes of the 30s if you ask me. The Mummy is a strong, melancholy and sometimes surprisingly risque movie that is still worth the time to dig up. Now we're coming up on the big ones. Dracula from 1931 is often considered the first sound horror film. It kicked off the Universal horror era and the studios would dominate the genre for years to come. This was the movie that made Bela Lugosi famous, and it set the standard for how the character of Dracula is portrayed, with the actor's Eastern European accent and intense eyes as the vampire hallmarks. Nowadays this movie might feel a touch outdated, with heavy dialogue, theatrical performances and almost no background music. But it's a powerful trendsetter and a true classic. Dracula again, or rather the Spanish version that was made alongside the American. They used the same sets and the same script, but the Spanish movie did turn out a tad stronger, more vivid and energetic. Sure, a Lugosi fanboy like myself can't help but miss him when watching this, but Carlos Villarreal also makes a great count. The Spanish Dracula is well worth your time. especially if you're already familiar with the more famous American version. To see a classic from another angle, that is a rare treat indeed. Frankenstein. Universal Studios' take on this Mary Shelley novel is so iconic that it all but eclipses the source material. This movie is memorable throughout, from foggy graveyards to bizarre laboratories and with highly quotable dialogue. The role of the monster made a star out of Boris Karloff, and I bet he in this shape is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the phrase Frankenstein. Many compare this to Dracula from the same year, but Frankenstein is easily the heavier hitter of the two. The director, James Whale, was a visionary, years ahead of his time, and that still shows. Sad, iconic, and ever memorable, this is a movie that stands many a resurrection. Compared to many of the heavier Gothic titles on this list, The Invisible Man is a surprisingly humorous film, even as it's pitch black and occasionally quite violent for its time. Claude Rains plays the lead character, a desperate scientist driven mad by his research. He's invisible or in disguise for most of the runtime, but still comes off as charismatic and scary as hell. The Invisible Man sports some great practical effects, memorable characters, and a powerful dialogue. Quite simply, a movie that should not go unseen. King Kong. This movie has seen its fair share of remakes and reimaginings, but the original from 1933 is, I dare say, still undefeated. The basic trope of the Beauty and the Beast has been done many times, even before this one, but seldom quite as spectacularly. The special effects work here is amazing, especially considering the standards of the time. No amount of computer graphics compares to honest goddamn craftsmanship, and this movie is just brimming with it. Colorized versions of this are available, but personally I prefer my apes in shades of grey. Before I reveal my top pick, let's drop a couple of honorable mentions, shall we? Freaks is a movie that was ages ahead of its time. I didn't include it on this list because, unlike many other critics, I don't consider it a horror movie. It's got a couple of creepy scenes, but it's more of a drama thriller. Still a good movie though. 1931's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is also a damn good movie. In any fair world, this should have gone on the list, but here there just wasn't room. Dracula's Daughter suffered the same fate. This direct sequel to Lugosi's Dracula is a fine movie in itself, but in the 30s there was just too much competition. And finally, The Old Dark House. Great in aesthetics and atmosphere, maybe a bit lacking in memorability. So, with titans like King Kong and Frankenstein already behind us, what could the number one spot be? The answer? A sequel. Bride of Frankenstein. Universal Studios' second installment in the Frankenstein franchise soundly surpassed the original on almost every point. The script is better, the special effects are better, the dialogue and the musical score not to say the least. Some say that the third film, Son of Frankenstein, is even better still, but for me the second one is the crown of the trio. Bride of Frankenstein is not just my choice for the top spot of this list. If I ever make a list of my favorite movies of all time, any genre, this one would probably be in the running for the top 3, and that I stand by proudly. And that concludes my list of the top horror films of the 30s. As mentioned, there was a lot of good stuff to choose from. Join us next time as we progress into the war-torn 40s and continue our journey towards Halloween. Thanks for watching, catch you on the flip side.